Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness. And Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is Donovan. And today I have a special guest, my friend Doron Lazarus. He is a certified science sleep coach and the founder of Executive Sleep Consulting, and he helps busy professionals get the sleep of their dreams. Please welcome Doron. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Dr. Alice and Donovan. Thank you very much for having me. It's really a pleasure to do. I'm a fan of both your works and really excited to be here.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. So I'm be curious to just start us off of hearing your story into becoming a sleep coach, and what was that path and why this is your passion?
Great question. So really, I mean, even as a kid, I was never a great sleeper. Always took me a long time to fall asleep, sensitive to light and sound. And then, in my teenage years, I had a great interest in psychology. That was kind of something that naturally attracted me when I ended up going to UCLA. I was kind of trying to figure out which path and career I wanted to do. And I studied psychobiology, was kind of a cross between psychology and neuroscience. So that was something that was really interesting to me. And then still couldn't sleep, by the way. I was a terrible sleeper, especially in those loud frat parties and dorms. And, college was one general experience of exhaustion. I remember I used to go to those afternoon science lectures where they dim the lights, and the guy with the thick forehead accent gets up there. You're just like, oh my gosh. If anyone has insomnia, just go to one of those classes. You'll be out in no time. Anyways, so I ended up kind of really in my 20s hitting a brick wall of insomnia. I had a stressful period in life. And I couldn't sleep. I just one night couldn't sleep at all. I ended up, I had a prescription of some sleeping pills, ended up taking sleeping pills. And at that point I was hooked on sleeping pills. I'm like, oh my gosh, like how do I sleep? How did I sleep? How did I ever sleep? Who ever taught me to sleep? What are the skills I needed to sleep? And I just couldn't do it anymore. And I definitely did not want to be on these pills. And the pills were running out. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I ended up finishing that course of pills, couldn't sleep without them. I ended up going back to my GP, begging for more pills. And he was like, well, giving me some advice here and there. Nothing he said helped. Ended up going to some psychologists, paid them a lot of money. Nothing they said helped. And at this point, I was getting really desperate. I was like, oh my gosh, right? I've contracted this incurable disease called insomnia, right? And I'm never going to be able to sleep properly for the rest of my life. Like, what happened to me? And that's when I really kind of took some time, zoomed out, took a little time of work and really started doing a lot of research. And I really there's this paradigm shift for, I would say, the way that most people who deal with sleep on a consistent basis and struggle with sleep, that struggle and that challenge they deal with, and then being able to have that shift and almost to rewrite their own narrative and change the way that their mind views sleep from the inside out. And when I was able to do that, and it didn't happen instantaneously, but I essentially was coaching myself through this process. When I was able to do that, not only did I drop the sleeping pills, like literally from night one, I dropped it completely, and I was able to get natural sleep within a few weeks. I was sort of say back to normal. Within a few months, I had trained myself that I was able to fall asleep almost instantly. And when I saw that, going from that situation of like literally being, sleepless, I would have gone for days without sleeping if it wasn't for these pills, to then to the point of being able to now sleep better than I ever had, because I had almost kind of really dug in and really understood how sleep works and understood how my mind works. And that was something that was very, very transformational for me. And so that was kind of really where my passion to be able to help others. And as I, kind of developed skills, ended up becoming a certified science sleep coach, ended up doing a lot of research into a lot of multidisciplinary areas in order to help different types of people, who struggle with sleep as well.
Wow, that was a pretty incredible story and pretty amazing to have just realized there's a different pathway than the sleeping pills option, and to kind of expand your mind on exploring what that looks like and to actually have that break free from your sleep struggles, because that makes a difference in your quality of life, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely, as I tell a lot of people, sleep is the foundation of so much of our physical health, mental health, emotional health, strength, immune system, concentration. It's just, if you're well rested, you can take on the world. Any challenge is, it becomes possible. But if you're sleep deprived, and your kid steals the Cheerios or your coworker looks at you wrong and you're exhausted, everything else becomes this like impossible task, emotional breakdown, can't handle it, lack that drive, that motivation, that kind of, oomph in life. And so really, I believe that everyone needs to be sleeping properly, especially with everything going on in the world today. That sleep is an amazing thing to be able to invest in.
Totally. Yeah.
I totally agree. First of all, like I can definitely tell the difference in my coping skills or any of my ability to do anything, whether or not, I've had good quality sleep or not. There was one thing that I honed in on kind of as you were talking, which was these skills, right? There's sleep skills. That's a word I heard you use a couple times. A lot of the times, or like a lot of the research or stuff I've looked at is always talking about, habits and routine and this kind of stuff. So I would be curious if you think there's a distinction to parse out there, and if there is, what it is, or just kind of how these two concepts of, a sleep routine and actual sleep skills kind of interplay.
Sure, Donovan, that's a great question. Certainly, I would call it almost like amateur and professional sleepers, so to say, to kind of compare those two groups that you kind of alluded to. Certainly the basics about sleep hygiene. It's amazing how many people know what the rules are of sleep and how few people actually keep them. It's like I was actually speaking to a friend of mine who was a health coach this morning, and like everyone knows if they want to lose weight how to do it. Secrets out there, like it's not rocket science. But if you've ever struggled with weight loss and you ever tried to go on a diet, it's literally the hardest thing in the world. You're like constantly hungry and constantly gnawing, and there's a battle of free will and a chocolate cake, and it gets you every time. And so definitely, I would agree that the basics of sleep hygiene, being able to have a set schedule, being able to have a wind down time, turn off that phone, get that phone out of the bedroom, and all of those kind of things, I think that definitely helps a lot of people. The average person will be helped by just stepping up of their sleep hygiene, right? I think they're going to sleep better, they're going to be more relaxed, they're going to be more well rested, hit those REM cycles, wake up more refreshed. But I think for a lot of people, that sort of say amateur level of advice is not enough. Ideal, and this is really kind of the interesting thing about sleep coaching, is you never really know who you're going to meet and what their background and baggage is. And, I'm sure Dr. Alice, you could experience this when people come into your practice, you literally, it's just like opening up like a Pandora's box of like history and issues and, the drugs they're on and disorders and this and that. People are fascinating. People have a history and they have their challenges. So, I think when I talk about those skills, it's, for a lot of people, I would say the number one sleep skill is being able to turn off their mind. And I think that's, so to say, like I would call almost like a amateur graduating to professional skill, to be able that, especially very driven, bright people. I'm sure some of your colleagues at Google over there, Donovan, people who are analytical, they're charging, their mind's always running to think about the next line of code or the next project or the next, new corporate takeover or whatever it is. It's very hard for them to be able to, hit the pillow and turn off that mind. So that's, I think, something that I work with a lot of people on, developing that skill to be able to, turn off their mind. And I think for other people, people have a hard time, they wake up every couple of hours, or they wake up and they raid the fridge every couple of hours, or they wake up with nightmares every couple of hours. So at that time, I think people really need the skills to be able to deal and get out of that situation. Merely having willpower of wanting to sleep better, or wanting the nightmares not to be there, or wanting to be able to sleep through the night, it's not going to do it. And sometimes if people almost overemphasize, like, oh, you just need to do sleep hygiene, that's usually not enough for those kind of more high level cases. So I think that's where, we really kind of try to raise the bar and graduate them to be professional sleepers, because indeed that's the skills that they need.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think it nicely parallels with something like anxiety, right? Where there are kind of these general tools that for people who have some anxiety can kind of get you to a place where your stress is reduced and get you functioning. But it depends kind of what your whole history and story is. And it sounds like, with sleep, same type of thing. If sleep is something that is consistently a problem, these surface level, a couple things that might work for maybe the general person are not going to work in all situations. So you need to be ready to unpack more and more layers. Same thing with, like panic attacks, right? Like if you just have general little bit of anxiety, that's normal, that's human. There's some things to lower it down. But if you have panic attacks, there's more work that needs to be done and layers that come off. I don't know if that resonates, but to me, that seems like a really nice parallel.
100%, absolutely, yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that I am excited to be, I'm happy to be able to do is actually to collaborate with Dr. Alice, because I know she definitely brings the physiological element to the table. She's able to do those hormone tests to see what's going on inside the body, see what's going on with those stress strands, adrenal glands, neurotransmitters, and that's a layer of sophistication that I think we're able now to bring to our practice. That people not only the psychology element of it, which is a big factor, and also the biomechanical element. I work with a lot of people about breathing and posture to be making sure that that's aligned for sleep as well. But now to be able to bring that third caveat in, because people again are multi-layered, trying to approach it from, and I would say maybe this is somewhat of a criticism of the Western medical system, that they're really kind of they're going for the symptom. Oh, your head hurts. This is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to diagnose. We're going to treat that thing. But I think in a little bit more of an Eastern fashion, they, to take a look at the holistic person and understanding what's going on. Are they accomplishing with their life mission? What is their source of stress? Where are they at? What are their ultimate goals? What is their ultimate source of motivation? And really kind of tapping into those things in a more broader fashion to be able to people, not only they're sleeping better, but hopefully their whole life is improved as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. It's just like, it's not like a one solution fits all. For people, we have to be a detective in some sense and really uncover what's at the source of it, because it could be different for everyone else or every case essentially. And I'd be curious, even though there is like, obviously we got to do some detective work and everyone's a different story. Do you have any like general tips or thoughts for people struggling with their sleep right now?
Sure, 100%. So again, I think, for a lot of people, I think the number one, so to say, sleep enemy number one is the cell phone. And it could be that people are like, yeah, I'll do the basics, but they're keeping their cell phone next to their bed, right? And their cell phone is their alarm clock. Yes. That itself is like, no, like it's not helping you, I mean, I was even speaking to my father this morning. My father is a physician and deals in addiction medicine and all sorts of kind of things like that. And it's like, this thing is to almost every human being on the planet the same way a glass of wine is to an alcoholic. It's a highly addicting substance, right? And so if you can't sleep, this thing is literally going to flood your mind with information, right? They're there as the computer program word will tell you. It's designed to be addictive. It's designed to know your personality at what time of the day and what do you want to watch and how do you feed that information. So I think for a lot of people, it's really having that clean break, being brave enough to turn off their phone and not think the world is going to melt down, without their knowing because they turned their phone off. I think the world will actually be a much better place if people have those clear boundaries with their technology. So that's definitely an area that I see a lot. I think a big area that I encourage people, it's almost like the prerequisite, I think, that comes with improving sleep, is to have sleep confidence, is to know that, there's two kind of people. And oftentimes when I speak to married people, usually one spouse is a great sleeper and the other spouse is a terrible sleeper. And the one spouse is like looking at their spouse and like sleeping like a log. Like, why are you sleeping so well over here at 3 in the morning and I can't sleep? Stop snoring or whatever the situation is. So I think, for people, I mean, I had my best friend in high school. He's a great guy. He lives in LA now. So he used to be able, if he was tired and there was a party going on, he would literally like crawl up in the corner with like a blankie and just go to sleep, like right there in the middle of the party on a stone floor. He had that ability. That was never me. I was never that guy. So you definitely have that, kind of personality. And you have people that, it takes them a long time to fall asleep, or they're very light sleepers, they're very sensitive sleepers, they're waking up all the time. And I think for a lot of people, they think that's just them, that there's nothing that can be done. And I think to be able to give over the idea that they should really kind of boost their own sleep confidence, that really they can change. There is a lot that can improve these things. Yes, you were born in an innate way with certain dispositions, but there is a lot that can be trained. There is a lot that can be improved. So I think that indeed can really help people. And I think the more, it's amazing. I was speaking to Donovan before our show about the technology. There is a lot of positive technology that people are able to implement in the bedroom, I think, to even help, the average sleeper, to be able to, with the watches and the rings now, to be able to track their sleep, to understand what's going on, even being conscious about how much sleep do they actually need, making sure they're actually getting that, making sure they don't just view sleep as some, kind of lazy commodity that's getting in the way of their success, but is actually something, one of the highest priorities they can invest in to ensure their success of their family life, their personal life, professional life, being a coder or Google or whatever you do. You really want to be, fully mentally sound going into those situations. So I think just almost that increased awareness and increased sensitivity of, what people feel like when they're tired and, indeed how to take charge of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would like to maybe hone in a little bit more on some of these mental aspects, because I think you hear, or generally people hear a lot about these, like we were talking about before, these like surface level skills, or kind of like set a routine, or like these very practical, functional type of things that they can do. And I think, at least in my experience, what I've seen, like there's a lot less on developing a mindset around sleep and a confidence that you can sleep well. Like I know a couple people who can't sleep well, and they definitely never communicate confidence about being able to sleep. So I'd be curious if there are more like other avenues that we can kind of explore on this mental side, because I don't think that gets as much light as some of these other things.
Right, 100%. And it's a great point. I'm sure Dr. Alice can agree that whenever you're trying to have a lifestyle change, the information is never enough. You're asking people to diet, you're asking people to exercise, you're asking people to, in general, sleep better or change their lifestyle in any capacity, get off of 12 cups of coffee or whatever anyone's vice is, and we all have our issues, but the idea that the doctor told you to do so and therefore you should do it is really just a surface understanding. I think, and this is something that I really try to tie into a lot of my practice, is to understand, like, ultimately, what is your motivation, and to really kind of dig deep and say, okay, I want to do better at work. Well, why do you want to do better at work? Where does that success come from? What is empowering? What is emblazing you? And really to tie that, almost that life mission statement into their desire to change, and to put up physical reminders, right? I'll have people put on their, refrigerator, because that's the center of everyone's home, of course, because everyone gets hungry, right? On the refrigerator, reminding themselves what is their mission statement, to be able to kind of tap into that, almost like that power source that they really feel motivated, because you can't just expect people are going to change simply because it's the right thing to do and they know intellectually. They have to feel that on an emotional, intrinsic level, indeed, that they're going to change. So I think that itself is, part of my coaching program, is inspiring that motivation within people that indeed they can change, and indeed, especially if they're there, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, alone, awake, they really need that extra oomph. It's not an easy thing to do, and for a lot of people, especially if they're on sleeping pills or something like that, it's just so easy just to kind of go back to that, that crunch. So to really kind of dive in and really kind of dig in for what their motivation is. So I think that's definitely a big part of it. In terms of the psychology, there's so many elements. I mean, the human mind is just, beyond fascinating. One of the things that I do is outcome like a psychological deep dive to understand that maybe, and this is really where kind of almost like sleep and spirituality kind of, border, is maybe there's something almost very deep in their subconscious that it could be they're not even aware of, but it is keeping them. And maybe that might be something, kind of very practical, like, whatever, they have some fight with their mom 5 years ago and they've never really kind of resolved that, or, certainly trauma in their past. I find that's a very, very common experience. And sometimes I'll outsource to trauma therapists to really kind of, dig deep and really understand indeed if there was something in their past like that. And sometimes it's almost like this existential angst that, again, it's a hard thing to put your finger on, but, to understand that the subconscious mind wants you to achieve your potential. And if you're not, even though it can't articulate it, it'll keep you up at night if you're not. And if you're not, so to say, asking big questions, what is the point of life? Am I accomplishing my life mission? Kind of thinking, we get so bogged down in the minor points, the details of life, sometimes to zoom out and to really take stock about the big questions of who we are and what we're doing here. Sometimes that itself can be a break in a person's subconscious to conscious mind. And we really try to flesh out those ideas and making sure that their entire existence, I call it synergy. right? That not only is there biomechanics and Dr. Alice with their physiology and all those elements, but their physical and emotional and spiritual life is in line. And I certainly am not here to preach anything to anybody. It ultimately has to come from them. But I believe people have within them an innate amount of wisdom that sometimes their subconscious mind, and I also deal with dreams. This is really an interesting area where dreams play into this, but their subconscious mind is almost pulling them back to their point of center if they indeed have lost focus.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's so much to uncover in the subconscious mind that a lot of us don't even know how to tap into or access without the support of someone. And really, it's like something that happened years or decades ago could be impacting our everyday life. And until we actually uncover it and resolve it, it's just going to hold us back or be a limiting thing that just is not making life as fantastic as it could be.
Sure. 100%. And even to kind of add on to both of those points, sometimes you can have someone, who's a very, especially like a type A, real kind of go-getter personality, that they have to always be in control of the situation. And sometimes their inability to sleep comes from the fact that they're not in control of it. And that's why, let's say, they go for the sleeping pill, that at least at that point, I'm in control of the situation. I dictate to my sleep cycle when it sleeps and when it doesn't sleep. And I think for a lot of people, it's being able to release that and to say, look, I'm not in control of everything. I am willing to allow for imperfection. I am willing to relinquish myself to my own sleep cycle and learn to respect that sleep cycle, right? And sort of say to remove control and kind of that almost like a Chinese finger trap. The more that we release, actually more free, and the more that power we gain. So certainly there's a lot of interesting mindsets and personality types that we meet that do have sleep issues, and we certainly try to work with them, each one according to their level.
Yeah, super important, because I do get a lot of clients that have a history of abuse, and that's a common trend that I see with a history of abuse. There's this need to control because of the fear of being controlled by others or being in a situation where they were hurt in the past. So that's dictating their ability to just let it go and just be okay with giving in a way.
Sure. 100%. I was actually speaking to another colleague of mine that I collaborate with, who's on weight loss. There's a lot of, just in general, there's a lot of synergy between weight loss and sleep. The better you sleep, the more your metabolism improves. You're able to, go for that weight loss and that fat burn, and the more motivation you have to go through that program. And on the flip side, the more, assuming that you're overweight, assuming you need to lose that weight, the more weight you lose, the better you're able to sleep. It helps with apnea. It helps with general body posture and just overall. So I think there's a lot of synergy to be played there. And I specifically was asking her about the situation about people who suffer from abuse and how she deals with that. And she says, and again, there's no hard and fast rule. Not everyone who has a weight loss issue has abuse in their past, but she says it's very common. And so to say, some people will subconsciously, they'll go for the comfort food to put on the weight to sort of say, almost like make their own space, especially, whatever, and God forbid, in sexual abuse cases, the people, they don't want to be touched. They don't want to be attracted to anybody. And they'll use the weight almost like as this mental blocker, right, to keep people out, right? And so sometimes it's really, obviously, again, each one of us has to know our discipline and, to be able to refer out to, to people that are very competent about working through that emotional scarring that some people have. But to ignore that, to just sort of say, like, give a quick laundry list, of things to do, I think is a disservice to the patient. I think really, we do try to dive in deep to really give them, the customized approach that they need.
Absolutely.
So as we're kind of talking about that subject, it sounds to me like the general approach is somewhere between kind of this holistic approach, but definitely knowing the boundaries, right, of like your expertise and where like the skills that you have or the knowledge that you have to share fits in. Maybe this is a super easy question, but like, how often do you find that it's, pretty like complicated things, like layers of things, as opposed to like, oh, like, listen, these are the 3 things that you need to change up, and there you go, like you're good to go? Or do you think that it's like, or have experienced a lot of the cases are kind of interweaved in a very deep way?
Good question, Donovan. I think that everyone has a little of something. Everyone has a little baggage that they're bringing to the table. I think definitely something I find quite commonly is that people are wearing labels. They're wearing stigmas, and even to the point of whatever. I don't want to get into all the details, but people, if they're told by mental health professionals that they have this, they have depression, that they have anxiety, they have insomnia, they have OCD, whatever these tendencies are. So sometimes, obviously those are realities, and there's chemical imbalances that need to be addressed, and some of the medication out there is really a life changer for a lot of people. But I think many people are wearing those, so to say, negative stigma labels, and that's almost, unfortunately, kind of common now in our generation. People just accept that fact and they carry that with them. So I would say for the most people I deal with, most cases aren't super complex. I would say those are kind of more of the rare cases, but I think a lot of people do bring some stigma, some mental baggage to the table, and so it's usually never as easy as just like, just turn off your phone before bed and you'll be fine. We do have to really kind of understand who they are, and also deal with a sleep cycle. As I tell all my clients, I don't have a set agenda for when you should go to bed, how many hours you should get, or anything like that. It really has to fit in your lifestyle. This is their life. Some people are morning people, some people are night people, some people like taking naps, and certainly we try to work with those different sleep personalities to help them kind of find their customized approach, as opposed to kind of like a one size fits all solution. In fact, there was a Dr. Alice, I'm not sure if you saw this, it was an interesting study that came out of the University of California, San Francisco Medical School, maybe about a year or two ago, where they isolated the gene. There's this genetic mutation, so to say, that some people have, that it allows them to thrive on 3 or 4 hours of sleep. So to say, for a normal person, 6 to 8 is their 3 or 4, and they're totally fine. They have the same benefit, like essentially they're like hyper speed sleep, right? And they're like take 3 or 4 hours, and they get the same benefit than a normal person does. So if people are in doubt whether they're one of those people, chances are you're not. Don't try it at home, but just to know that there are different people out there, and to not put people in a box, especially with mental health, I think is something very important. So definitely, Donovan, I would say most people are on a mid-level of complexity, and we try our best to really kind of be able to sort them out and give them the custom care that they need.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And also, I noted as you were speaking, kind of this labeling issue, or this like expectation issue is the way that I would frame it. And I think that's really interesting because, on the one hand, if it's something you're struggling with, and not just sleep, but just in general, if you're struggling with something and you get a label for it, it's nice in some sense in terms of, oh, now I know what this thing is, right? Now I know I have insomnia, and that's what this struggle is. But I think, like you were saying, I think it's a trap that people fall into very often, that they hear those words, they get those labels, and then they set their expectations accordingly. And then they just expect that whatever this thing is, I'm going to experience it at this intensity, at this same level, no matter what. And I think that's like just across realms, a very, very common problem, is just having those expectations and then thinking, well, I don't know how much I should really try to do or change because I have insomnia, I have depression. And I'd be curious to kind of talk about like some of the things that you've seen in terms of like harder, easier cases, I guess, like, if you think about with the depression as a parallel, right? Some cases are treated relatively easy and some kind of tend to persist. I would imagine in the sleeping realm, it's kind of the same, but I have no idea. And I'd be curious kind of what you do to set new expectations around that, or how you help people build a mindset that allows them to be more open than just these labels.
Sure, 100%. It's a great question, and definitely an integral part of my practice. I mean, I've had a couple of clients that were, and oftentimes the story goes is have a hard time sleeping. They go to their doctor, maybe it's, upgrade to a psychiatrist or whatever the situation is. They give them sleeping pills, and they work maybe for 6 months, maybe a year, maybe a little more. They're not working so well. They go back to the doctor upgrades the prescription, then works a little bit more, and then doesn't work, or then they go ambient driving and get pulled over or whatever. There's like crazy stories of what happens to these things. And then the doctor's like, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to switch your sleeping pills and we're going to up the dose. And like at a certain point, they've just been like so like, and like they're just like enough, you know. As I had a guy that the doctor was wanting to up his dose now for the 4th time, and he came to me. He's like, I'm just not willing to take that much medication. It's just too much, you know. I mean, I've been with people that have, you know, whatever. There was one guy I dealt with. I was like, the guy was literally on 6 or 7 substances every night just to get 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and I was like, whoa. Literally, the guy had to travel out the country to get that many sleeping pills because that's how many he felt that he needed. And so, you know, in a few of the situations, literally, we were able to go cold turkey on the sleeping pills. Literally, went from one night, you know, literally for 8 or 10 years, the guys had been on sleeping pills. And the simple fact that I did exercises with him to reinforce the fact that he does not have a disease. He does not have insomnia. In fact, and I think this is a very important point that you alluded to, in my perspective, insomnia doesn't exist. And the sooner that people get onto the fact that there is no such thing, they don't have to cure their insomnia. They have to convince themselves it never existed in the first place. The symptoms exist. They're up all night. And I get that and I resonate with that. And my heart goes out to people who struggle in that area. But as soon as you imagine that there's this devil called insomnia that's haunting you, you're never going to be able to run away from it. It's always going to be there. The first stage to recovery is to break those. So I do a lot of things, certainly with journaling. I actually have like a manifesto that people put on the back of their phone or on their fridge, describing like, you don't have insomnia. In fact, insomnia doesn't exist. I'm an insomnia breaker. That's what I call it. Like that's their tagline. It's like this motivational sense of like, yeah, they're actually, I have to stop running. Because for a lot of people, insomnia is the fear of not being able to fall asleep. They're afraid of what's going to happen if they don't fall asleep. So they keep running in their mind. When am I going to fall asleep? How long is this going to go on for? And that itself keeps them up. So to be able to break those vicious cycles, to be able to give people that confidence, I have every one of my clients tell one person a day, hey, I'm a great sleeper. I got a great sleep last night. How about you? Even if they were up the whole night, they did not get a wink of sleep. They have to walk into work the next day and tell their coworker or their secretary or their boss, he's like, oh yeah, I do sleep. I slept great. Even if they're lying through their teeth. Because there's a reality to that if they talk the talk, they will come to walk the walk. They will literally change the way that their mind views about those negative labels they put on, about that stigma, about those anxieties, and they literally slowly but surely start shedding those off. And it's amazing for people that have been wearing these things for years, how quickly, if they're done in a proactive way, and they have the motivation, they have the confidence to change, how quickly indeed they can shed those labels.
Wow, that's pretty impactful of what a difference the mindset can do. And it almost sounds like it's this vicious self-fulfilling prophecy when they're in this mindset, like, I'm an insomniac, this is just going to be my life forever. And then they feed in, and then they're laying in bed and they're like, oh, I can't sleep. I hear this all the time with patients. It's like they're just laying there thinking about how badly they can't sleep. And then that's just feeding into their inability to sleep because they're so focused on how they're not sleeping. And it just feeds in it. I love the idea of just tell people that you're a great sleeper, because it's creating a new identity as an amazing sleeper in a way. And eventually it becomes who you are if you repeat it enough and you start to build that confidence in that this is who I am. Even though, yeah, there'll be off nights where I don't have amazing sleep, but who I am as a great sleeper can definitely shift things for people.
Sure, 100%. And I see this a lot as well for people. I'm actually seeing, I don't know if nationally this is happening or just anecdotally in my practice, the people having a fine time falling asleep, but a hard time staying asleep. People who will get up after 2 or 3 hours and have a hard time going back to bed or whatever that situation is. And so I think in there is a powerful amount of reverse psychology that actually really helps, because people wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning. They look at the clock, like, oh my gosh, it's 2 or 3 in the morning. I'm up again. How long is this going to go on for? Right. And then, they try to go back to sleep, whatever the situation is. They're running away from the fact that they keep waking up at night. So one of the writing exercises I do them is actually have them accept that fact. And literally say, whatever sleep I get, whatever time I wake up, I'm happy with that. I'm comfortable with myself. I'm confident. I'm not running away from anything. I'm not feeding that own anxiety, whatever. And I usually tell them to take all their clocks out the room, which is certainly something that helps, because that if they wake up at 3 in the morning, like, oh my gosh, it's 3 in the morning, how am I going to survive the next day? As opposed to they get up and it's just dark outside, and they'll have to figure things out that way. So but really to be able to change that narrative and have people accept themselves, right? Have people love themselves and have that healthy self-esteem of whatever sleep I get, I'm going to be fine tomorrow. To be able to break those anxieties that run through people's heads, that indeed feed into this vicious cycle, as was said, that people can't be able to sleep.
Yeah, that's definitely unraveling. Just thinking about my own sleep, and I have certain identity that like I need 7 to 9 hours to feel good the next day. If I don't, I feel like crap. And this is kind of a story I realized because last night, literally, the dog is going through diarrhea phase, and between 3 and 4, he's like scratching at the door to get out 3 times between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to ruin my day. I'm not going to get great sleep. And to realize that, no, it doesn't have to ruin my day just because of this event. And yes, it disrupted my sleep, but I did fall back asleep eventually once we came inside after the 3rd time. But yeah, I just realized, these self-limiting thoughts can just be all over the place and we don't even realize it.
Right, 100%. And, I think for a lot of people, they really, sometimes almost that kind of like oversleep promotion, they hear everyone telling them, you need to get 8 hours of sleep. If you don't get 8 hours of sleep, all these bad things are going to happen to you. So like well-meaning, healthcare, professionals can, try to say that. And there are obviously is studies and information linked to that. But for some people, that's almost crippling to hear because they're not getting 8 hours of sleep. And then they're worrying like, oh my gosh, well, I'm not getting 8 hours of sleep. I'm going to have this catastrophic thing happen to me. And I remind people like, there are ER doctors and, Air Force One pilots and things like that. Like they're up for 36 hours at a time and they function. People go to war and, they function, not ideal, but you do pretty well. And so to keep that in mind, and, as a father, I have a number of little kids at home. My wife's more of the nighttime trooper, sometimes especially with the babies. But like when we're young, we don't even think we have that resilience until you have a kid or two and you're like, oh, I can do this. I mean, not always, sometimes it's a little bit exhausting as well. I'm not saying the babies are easy, but I think it helps kind of build that strength. And this is certainly something that I encourage people, if they're at the stage in life, like they're not a family person yet, they don't have kids, and their sleep is an issue, like now's the time to invest. Because, one day, when you have a family or you have kids, right, you don't want to be suffering from sleep issues then. You're like, the kid wakes you up at 2 in the morning and you can't go back to sleep. No, you got to be able to deal with that now, invest in those skills now, that you're going to be able to hit the ground running, for whatever life brings you.
Yeah, I think that really touches on a couple things for me. So there are several people in my life that I'm relatively close to that have an extremely hard time sleeping. And I've just now realized that I'm part of the problem of building onto their anxiety about it because, in a helpful way, I've tried to be like, oh, well, 3 hours, 4 hours is not enough. Or like, you can't stay up all night. Like, that's not good. Like, you got to come up with some other strategies. And now I'm realizing that it's part of this cycle that we've been talking about where like they have these anxieties about sleeping. And one person in particular, I've had instances where they say they're going to bed, come back 3 minutes later and say they can't sleep. And if that's a lack of sleep confidence, like, I don't know what else could be. Like, that's crazy. Like, they didn't even, in my mind, they didn't even try it, but they built up this narrative so strongly of like, I can't sleep, that immediately they just give up on it. And I think it's really important that we got to this topic because like I sleep well most of the time, but the people around me don't. And I have been guilty of probably doing things that make it more difficult for them to continue sleeping and produce more anxiety. So it's nice to have like at least a framework or at least a way to approach other people that are having these problems and be a little bit more helpful than just saying something that I'm sure they already know, which is 2 hours of sleep is not ideal for them. Like, I'm sure they know that. I'm sure they're well aware that I'm often tired and that, then they're also probably bombarded with these other messages of like, it's not enough sleep, it's not enough sleep, and not enough sleep. And for me, again, as someone who, for the most part, sleep is just something that comes naturally as part of my life, like I'm not seeing those messages everywhere, but I'm sure they are. So I just wanted to highlight that I think that's a really useful piece of information and insight that I picked up out of this.
Amazing. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think almost everyone knows someone with sleep issues. I mean, 1 in 3 Americans suffers from insomnia at least one point during the year. 1 in 10 people are on sleep medication. I mean, it's no doubt you go into Walgreens or go into a drugstore, there's a whole aisle of sleep aids. Like this is a multi-billion-dollar issue that's affecting millions of Americans and if not billions of people around the world. So certainly you're definitely not alone in that experience. I remember when I was suffering from insomnia and I went to my GP and I asked for another round of sleeping pills. And he looked at me, and a well-meaning guy, I don't blame him now, he looks at me, he's like, why don't you just relax and go to sleep? And I literally wanted to hit him in the face. I was like, you idiot, that's the most insensitive thing that you could tell someone who has insomnia, but they just don't know, right? And again, I'm sure there are, other physicians that are more sensitive and more in depth with these kind of things. But I actually wrote a post once about the top 5 things never to tell an insomniac, and that's kind of one of them. It's even to call them an insomniac, the word is very degrading. You're not a person anymore, you're an insomniac, and they wear that label now on their forehead, and that's like we said, it can be a very very self-fulfilling prophecy. So certainly to be able to be supportive, right, and especially spouses who sleep fine, it's sometimes hard to be able to support their spouse. Their spouse is up all night and then their spouse is not functioning the next day, right? And they're not going to be able to, take care of kids, go to work, basic housework, they're blaming their spouse, so that sometimes further feeds into it. So you really kind of have to understand the whole family dynamic, to be able to improve things.
Yeah, I think this whole video is important, not just for people that struggle with sleep, but people that are on the other side watching their partner or someone they love and care about struggle with it, and how to be more sensitive to that issue and just not be like, oh, just relax. That would that would be saying to a depressed person, oh, just be happy. It's simple as that. It's if they could decide that's a choice, then they would choose that. Like that kind of a thing. So I get it. Well, Doron, I really appreciate you joining us on Happy Talks. It's been a pleasure. Is there anything you'd like to plug before we wrap up today?
I'd like to plug you guys. You're both doing great work. Dr. Alice is a phenomenal naturopath. She really helps her clients, with stress and general life change. And Donovan over there is up to great things at Google and up and coming on the mental health technology front. So you guys are doing great work. Thank you for having me. If anybody is interested in speaking to me, setting up a consult, learning more, you can visit me on LinkedIn or Facebook. There are not that many Doron Lazaruses, so you would hopefully find there's one other fellow with my name in Australia, but I'm not the Australian one, so don't get us confused. Or you can visit us online at executivesleep.org, and feel free to reach out. We'd love to be of assistance.
Yes, and we'll have his links and website into the description below, so check him out there if you want to have a sleep confidence and have the night of sleep of your dreams.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks again for joining us. And thank you everyone for watching and tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Awesome. Take care.
You can check out more content at howtohappy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date on the videos. We've also got a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook that you can check out. Reflect, take action, and enjoy life. See you next time.